Hello, Resilient Souls. Welcome to Neuro Wellness Community's Resilience Resourcing Podcast, where connections empower resilience. This is a connection space where inspiring women and men share their real on their way to resilience. Each episode, I have the pleasure of spotlighting women and men in fields from performance neurotraining to film and all in between. You will get to know the unique tools these individuals each carry and how connecting with these empowering stories bring about camaraderie and in turn empower you toward your unique dreams and goals. So I have the incredible opportunity to speak today with Jem Fuller, and Jem Fuller is off of TED Talks. He's been on TEDx Talks. I think it was London. Is that correct?
Almost, yeah. It was Londonderry, which is in Northern Ireland.
Oh, so Ireland. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
You can find his TEDx talk on YouTube basically, and it's, all about conscious communication. And, really I just connected with him on social media because his mission really aligns with resilience and what this podcast is all about. And I just wanted to connect more on here really as we meet actually for the first time face to face to kind of get to know Jim and what drives him and what started your journey towards resilience and towards conscious communication.
Yeah. Happy to fill you in a little bit on that, Holly. But first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on your show and for reaching out to me. When you reached out on social media and I checked out your work and your message and what you care about. And I felt an alignment and I thought, oh wow, I really want to meet this person and have a conversation with you. So thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Such an incredible honor.
Yeah. So how did I end up focusing on resilience and communication? I, yeah, I'm 52 years old and that's a 52-year-old story, and if you had have asked me when I was 20, that I would be doing this when I'm now at this age, I would have said, no, no way, that's not me. Um, but my life journey really has been a lot of just following my gut, following my heart, following my loves, and also then, dealing with the hard stuff that comes along and the stuff that's out of our control and, losing loved ones and dealing with grief or going through periods of self-doubt and even self-loathing when I was younger and really, really low self-esteem. And then bolstering myself back up again and thinking, no, 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 I'm fine. I've got this. And then life deals you another kind of joker card,
Yep.
and so it's just really been me kind of bumbling my way through life to the best of my ability. But at the same time, there's definitely been some themes. I never wanted to just follow the normal route. I never wanted to um, just go and be I don't mean to sound demeaning to anyone when I say this. I didn't want to be the hamster in the wheel. I didn't want to just, buy what my culture told me when they said you should just get as good a job as possible, work as hard as possible, make as much money as possible, buy the house and the car and have the family, and then make more money and get a boat, and then make more money and get I never bought into that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really rebelled from that as soon as I did finish high school. But halfway through my last year in high school, we call it high school here. I'm not sure if that's what you call it over there.
It is. We
Um,
call it high school here too.
yeah, yeah. So typically you finish high school when you're about 17 or 18.
Hmm.
And halfway through my last year of high school, my best friend died, just around the time of my 18th birthday.
Wow.
And that was the first experience of grief that really hit me hard.
Hmm.
And I kind of was rethinking everything, and I think that's when I just went, I don't want to do this whole game, this Western capitalist game. I just had to run away from it. So as soon as I finished high school, I moved over to the other side of the world,
Wow.
and just wanted to be as far away from everyone as possible. And then I started traveling and fell in love with traveling. And then through my 20s, I just wanted to keep getting into foreign culture and especially cultures that were really different to mine, to where I grew up. At the time, I didn't really understand why. I mean, I knew I liked adventure, and I was adventurous. You know, I've got lots of travel tales, and people go, "Oh my, you're actually lucky to be alive." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so." So at the time, I thought it was just adventure, but now, really, as a 52-year-old, looking back at my younger self, um, understanding that I was driven by connection,
Yep.
and I was really driven to connect authentically and deeply with people who are really different to me. I mean, it's easy to connect with someone who's the same as you, and that's nice. Like if I meet someone and we've got lots of things in common, and they grew up in Australia and so did I, and they went to a similar school to me and so did I, and they have the
Yeah.
same kind of political or religious or ideological beliefs, and maybe we even barrack for the same football team, right? And that's nice. That's like, oh yay.
Yeah.
We get along so easily. And I do appreciate that as well. But what I get way more nourished by is meeting someone who sees life completely differently to me.
Mhm.
And for us to have the opportunity to sit down and get curious about how they came to their experience and perceptions of life. And then to find the common ground,
Mhm.
and to connect over things like survival needs, food, water, shelter, and emotional needs like love and connection and caring for your children, or the grief when a loved one dies, and to connect on these deeper levels and see each other over the divide of difference and go, hey, I see you, you
Yeah.
know, namaste.
Yeah.
And that's what namaste means.
Yeah.
I see you completely deeply, not just visually.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I know I'm not alone. I know humans like to connect. And it's interesting because, so I'm going on a little bit of a tangent now, but with the divisiveness in terms of creating polarity, and whether it's social media, algorithmic division, or whether it's Twitter, same, or whether it's political agendas trying to divide people for whatever that reason is. The people who hate each other or think they hate each other,
Mhm.
so you've got someone who's pro-life and someone who's pro-choice, and they'll shout at each other across social media, or try and cancel each other, or try and tear each other down, and they're behaving like they hate each other. They haven't actually met.
Yeah. It's true.
They haven't actually met each other.
Yep.
I saw this I listened to this podcast, and it was this guy who does mediation and conflict resolution, and he
Mhm.
used to be a neo-Nazi. He wasn't KKK. He was part of a neo-Nazi group in New York or something, a white supremacist group. He'd never met a black person, but he made a bunch of poor choices and got sold a bunch of really, really bad ideas around how to be as a human. And he was struggling. And so he bought into these ideas. Next thing he knows, he was the leader of a neo-Nazi group, right?
Oh my God.
And then thankfully he had his kind of midlife awakening and came out of it and did all this the self-reparation work. Now he works as a mediator, and he'll get someone of color and someone from a neo-Nazi group, get them in the same room together, and through a conversation and helping them actually meet each other and connect, and they end up becoming friends.
That's
And then their
incredible.
ideas around right and wrong fall apart because they've never actually met.
Yep.
And anyway, I love that, and I can't help but be optimistic, or at least hopeful, that humanity can evolve in the right direction. And I know it's precarious right now. I know it looks a little bit like, oh no, maybe we're devolving.
Mm.
Um, but I still believe that with the right enough people like you taking the time and the effort to do the work that you do and record conversations and share them, that if enough of us are doing this, we can tip the scales just in the right direction for us to evolve. Because I believe that humans deep down,
Mhm.
given the chance and given the encouragement to feel safe enough, and not be led by fear, but to come from a place of love, I believe we can connect and collaborate and work together, and I believe that we can come from a place of love, you know.
It's so, I mean, you just articulate so much of what neuro wellness community and the resilience resourcing podcast that I started is about. Like, I'm just kind of in awe because what you understand to like the core of who you are and what you speak about, what you write about in your book, what you do, these retreats that you share at. um Even if you look at your website, you talk about resilience and leadership and culture and how all these things are connected with communication and bringing people together. And I started Neuro Wellness, and our little tagline is where connections empower resilience. And it's because that is so 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 important for us as humans, is that connection. And we're living in a culture where people are so polarized, and it's like you said, kind of cancel culture. And if one's pro-life, one's pro-choice, if one's one different diverse culture than another, we polarize all of these things, and we don't even know each other. It's over,
Yeah.
like, hiding behind a screen. And then you add COVID and the isolation that that added. And that's honestly when this podcast started, because we did a retreat in 2019 to bring resources and bring people together, and then COVID happened and we couldn't do retreats. And so
Yeah.
we pivoted to the podcast to connect with people so that they didn't feel alone. And I align so much with everything that you talk about, with that desire to bring people together, to find ways to help people connect. And you're educated in it, not only because of your own experience, but because you've gone out and like been part of different cultures. And you wrote a book on conscious communication, which is incredible. And I'd love to talk more about that too, but I'm very interested in like what you saw across different cultures when it came to you know people's communication styles. And then, like, because you speak on resilience, like you have an online course about personal resilience, is that something, did you see different aspects of the resilience within different cultures?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly different aspects, and there are these beautiful commonalities,
Yep.
you know, cross-cultural commonalities that we have. And, there are some, I call them human macro behavioral patterns. So there are some macro behavioral patterns that apply across culture. So whether you're from China or Australia, there are some patterns that apply,
Mm-hmm.
and also some core fundamental shared experiences that we have.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the need to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very human species need, and that's evolutionary. There was no way we could have evolved or survived the savannah plains if we didn't figure out how to work in teams.
Yep.
We're a teams animal, we're a social animal,
Yep.
and we need each other. So that need to connect, that need to love and feel loved, is very much entrenched in our oldest DNA.
Yep.
So that's right there. And then also other things, like that. So off the flip of that, the fear of being isolated. That's a fear that all humans have, except for the anomaly, which is the monk that sits in the cave meditating for 30 years eating chapati, right?
Yeah.
There's always an anomaly. But generally speaking, we don't do well in isolation. We don't like it, and it to the point where we've even measured that people who end up in isolation due to their family and friends dying, and maybe there's an old man living in an apartment in New York on his own, and he's got really little connection with the outside world. We know that those people have a shorter lifespan. We know that their health suffers. We know all of these things, right?
Yeah.
So we flourish in connection, and that's
Yep.
another reason why I love your expression of how you're trying to positively contribute to community and to society. What you're doing, I think, is really important. And so then other things that we have in common, like I say in the TEDx talk, grief. When a loved one dies, we go through grief, and that's a connector. That's something that we share.
Mm-hmm.
Also in that talk, I talk about the young university student in Pakistan when I was backpacking through there in the 90s. And actually, I was there in 1998, and I was there before um, someone bombed an American embassy in Africa, and then Osama bin Laden claimed responsibility for that. This is in 1998, right? So this is
Wow.
a couple of years before 9/11.
Yeah.
And then the American government at the time sent cruise missiles into Pakistan to try and kill Osama bin Laden. They didn't get him, but they tried to, and some civilians were killed. And I was there at the time, just backpacking around northern Pakistan, not far from where all this happened.
Wow.
And so anyway, after this had happened, I was sitting on a bus, a public bus, up in the Hindu Kush mountains, beautiful, stunning mountains. And I was chatting with this local Pakistani university student next to me, and he was studying at university, so he spoke just enough English for us to have a conversation, which was really lovely.
Yeah.
And he said something to me that just stayed with me forever. He was a devout Muslim.
Hmm.
I was an atheist,
Hmm.
right? But we were chatting and connecting, and he said to me, "If we cut your skin here and we cut my skin here, you and I, we have the same color blood."
Yep.
Right? And he looked me in the eyes when he said it. He was basically saying, we're the same deep down underneath all of the societal, religious, and, you know, geopolitical difference. Underneath it all, we're the same, he said. And
Yep.
he was probably like a 21-year-old. I was 28. And it was this
Wow.
beautiful connection.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that, that's one of many connections that I've had with people all around the world that have been really heartening for me. And so I'm passionate about cross-cultural connection because the similarities are right there, and
Yep.
sure, there's a lot of difference, and wow, your food tastes really different to my food, or that's the way you cook that. Oh my God. Or that's the way you treat your mum. Wow, I would never get away with that in my household, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you don't have to scratch the surface too deep to find the commonalities.
It's incredible because, I feel like people, especially in the Western culture, forget that there is so many commonalities between us and people that we, may have a different culture than us or a different religion than, I mean, honestly, the West, especially US, is a melting pot, and
Mm,
we have lots of different culture here, but there's a lot of clashes lately, and then that becomes like globally there's clashes, and you know, but deep down, like we are all the human race. We all bleed the same, as you say, and
yeah,
one of my favorite artists has a song about that, and it's truly, I think, the way that we find opportunities to connect to people. Honestly, I think it is during times of vulnerability, during times where, you know, whether it's a crisis, you oftentimes see people finding ways to care for people that maybe in everyday life they would maybe overlook, but in a crisis situation, people don't care about those things as much. And I feel like those are times that people come together and they find a
yeah,
way to, I mean, it can be like a beautiful, like a hard hard but beautiful example of how we all have that same like innate desire to care for people and to
yeah,
understand like we're truly all in this together. Like it,
yeah,
like you said, you can't survive, you will not survive as long if you are doing this on your own. And
yeah,
especially in
yeah,
like a crisis situation, you're going to recognize that probably sooner than in a day where we kind of live in such an independent society. And I don't know if I explained this already, but Jem is in Australia. So he's actually in the future. He's a day ahead of us than here
yeah.
in the US. And you know um I don't know if it's as similar in Australia. I haven't had the opportunity to visit Australia, but I've always been so enthralled by all the things that Australia, just the beautiful ocean and everything that Australia is surrounded
Mm.
by and has to offer. But is is there as much fierce independence in Australia as there is in the US? Have you noticed any difference there?
There's so many similarities. Um, there's a lot of similarities between our cultures. And yeah, sure, there are some differences as well. But if you were to compare Australia to America, as opposed to comparing Australia to Sudan,
Hmm.
you'd basically say that Australia and America are siblings. Do
Okay,
you know what I
very
mean?
similar.
Or
Yeah.
and maybe even more similar to Canada as well. Australia,
Yeah.
Canada, America, New Zealand. These big countries that were colonized by Europeans and then other peoples from around the world as well. Indigenous, original First Nations peoples that were horribly um, lots of genocide
Yep.
and killing and all the horrible stuff that
Yep.
happened when other foreigners came and took over these lands. So there's lots of similarities. And Australian culture has been very influenced by American culture in terms of pop culture,
Yep.
music and capitalism and how we run out and the stock market and we've been very, very influenced by the States. So lots of similarities there. Maybe not quite as extreme as the States, it appears to me, and I don't consume mainstream news. I'm very selective with where I get my international news from, but I've got a lot of friends
Mm-hmm.
in the US. So I'm hearing from friends, what it's been like and how it's becoming more and more polarized and what's going on, which is, alarm bells. But like back to what you were talking about, Holly, I don't know if you've read a book called Humankind, as in two
Sounds
words,
so
human and
cool.
then the word kind.
Yep.
And the author is a Dutch author called Rutger Bregman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, Rutger Bregman. And I love this book. He's got tons of evidence in there that proves what you were just saying about when humans are actually in crisis situations, our default is to look after each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the mainstream media and the Western political world would have us believe that that's not the case.
Yep.
So mainstream media, because fear and clickbait and what sells newspapers and TV, television news, etc., is all the horrible stuff.
Yep.
So, for example, with um, Cyclone Katrina and in the floods and everything like that, and we over here in Australia, we saw news stories of rapes in the refugee centres or people pillaging and stealing from each other and blah blah blah. But in his book Humankind, Bregman actually shares the truth of what happened, and people came together to
Mm-hmm.
survive. People helped each other. People
Yep.
were gathering water and food to share in those shelters.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the Lord of the Flies. You know that famous book, The
Yeah.
Lord of the
Yep.
Flies,
Yep.
right? Where the kids get abandoned on an island and they become cannibals and they kill each other and eat each other. That was a fictional story. The guy who wrote that story was an alcoholic who was an abusive husband and father who used to beat his children. And he wrote this book called Lord of the Flies, and somehow it became popular, and somehow everyone took that as the Bible of child psychology when they get left on an island on their own, right? But the true story of Lord of the Flies, there was a group of boys from one of the Solomon Islands, I think it was, one of the islands in the Southwest Pacific, and they did get marooned on an island, these teenage boys. I think there was six of them. And they lived on this island on their own with no resources for a year. And they developed their own culture of looking after each other. They developed their own law, as in LORE, law, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if two of them started to get heated and started to look like they were going to have an argument, they made a pact that they would walk away, have some time to calm down, and come back to sort it out. They lit a fire and they would take turns to man the fire so that there was always smoke so they could get found. They found ways to work together as a team, to fish, to get food, all this beautiful stuff of them. And the only way they survived was by coming together and connecting, communicating, and collaborating. This
Awesome.
is what humans are like,
Yep.
right? Not this, we get fed this fear stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just not true.
Nope. And it's, I mean, what would our world be like if I feel like the European, especially our Western world, be like if we recognize more how much we can come together. And
Mm,
I started doing, like I said, we did a retreat in 2019, and my biggest goal really, was to make sure that there was no hierarchy within the system, that, it didn't matter who or what level, whether it was a doctor or a person who was living on the street, everybody was welcome, and there was no touch of, hierarchy, honestly. All these resources were available for everyone at the same time. And there was this sense of accomplishment for me in not the numbers, but in the fact that people felt seen, heard, welcome, safe. And, that's something that I can't even describe, like, what that feels like to be a part of a community in a group like that, because that's so rare. And, um, the goal for neuro wellness community and the retreats that we do moving forward is to heal, grow, and connect. And I truly believe that growth and healing doesn't happen unless we connect first, on the fact that we're all human, and it doesn't matter where you come from, what level of um, status you have, or any of those things. Like, it's really about breaking down barriers, and allowing people to just be seen and
Mm,
loved, and all of us. I mean, it's not, I get so much out of it from someone who may have a totally different experience than me, because I'm getting new perspective, and I'm getting,
mm,
it's doing a lot to my heart and soul to learn about other people and about their life and culture and what they have to bring, that I would never have access to. And the same, I hope,
yeah.
and so I just love that you, like, it just aligns so much that you recognize how significant it is that people need to connect. Like, we need each other.
Mm,
And, like, even
mm.
the fact that you're on this podcast right now with me, like, you are living that, like, out. And, like, even when you listen to your TED talk, or you look at your website, or you look at your social media, like, everything that you use your, resources and opportunities, you're using them to bring people together. You do retreats. I would like to learn a little bit more about the retreats that you do, because, I do retreats too, so it's interesting to
Yeah.
hear kind of what that's all about, and how you bring people together at your retreats.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And happy to share that. I just would love to um, communicate with you about some of the things that you've just said. I think you made some really good points in there. And, if we take a few steps back in terms of human history,
Hmm.
and in times where there was a scarcity of resource and we had to fight for resource. I get it. You're a tribe here, there's a tribe over there, and there's not enough food to go around, and or there's not enough shelter to survive, or there's not enough, right? Scarcity. And we had to fight for resource. I get that. But that's the past,
Yep.
right? That is the past. And we now getting more and more, there's enough resource, and we're learning how to harness it more and more effectively. If we can make it through the next 10 or 20 years, we're going to know how to resource the power of the sun and the wind and the ocean, so that the cost of energy will become negligible. Now, that's a game changer, absolute game changer.
Yep.
What we need to figure out is how to equitably um, disperse and share the resource, right?
Yep.
We're making more food than we need,
Yep.
right? We've got some countries where obesity is a problem because there's too much food and it's not good quality. And we've got countries where there's starvation because they don't have enough food, right?
Yep.
When we can figure out how to allocate resource, we could be fine, right? So it's not, scarcity is not a problem anymore.
Yep.
The fighting that's going on now is not because there's not enough. The fighting that's going on is because people have been sold bad ideas,
Yep.
right? People have been sold ideas that um, the way we choose to live and the God that we choose to believe in cannot cannot be unless everyone sees things the way we see things. I.e., there can be no diversity. There has to be only our way, and our way is the only way. That all just comes from fear,
Yep.
right? And it's just bad ideas. It's not to do with resource allocation. It's political agendas. It's ego. It's all of this old human fear-based ways of existing that are not necessary anymore.
Yep.
And if we can, bit by bit, tip the scales in the right direction, if we can incentivize wealthy people to be more generous with their excess wealth that they don't need in functional ways, if we can allocate and disperse the resource of wealth, because there are people out there who've got way more money than they can ever do anything with, right? If we can incentivize them in the right ways to be generous with that excess wealth, we can change the world. We
Yep.
really can. I believe it can happen. So anyway, look, I might be sounding a little bit ideological about this or idealist about this, but if we don't believe it's possible, then we're all just going to give up, and then
Yep.
then we're screwed,
Nope.
right?
We
So we
gotta
got to
have
we got to
vision. Yeah.
we got to have vision, we got to have hope.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a little bit of about what you were talking about around humans and connection and the goodness of our hearts. I
Yep.
believe humanity is underneath some bad ideas that people get sold on. Underneath that, I believe humans are generally good.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
that's my experience. I've traveled
Same.
around the world extensively, and I meet people a lot. Like I go on a lot of podcasts. I have a lot of connections, a lot of people that I meet, and they're all really lovely, and they're all trying their best to
Mm-hmm.
to contribute in some positive way. So I believe
Same.
people are generally good. And anyway, that's that bit. But the retreats are, one of the reasons that I love running retreats. It's actually my favorite piece of
Mm-hmm.
work that I do is because when you remove yourself from your normal paradigm, i.e., so you leave the city that you spend most of your life in or the town,
Mm-hmm.
and when you go away, so there's some travel, there's some journey that's required to get to this place of retreat. And especially for me, when you go to a different culture, so it's the smells are different, the sounds are different, the language is different, the buildings are different, everything's different. So
Yep.
you're outside of your normal container of ways of thinking. And for me, retreat, it's really important to go somewhere that is in nature, beautiful, stunning nature. That's why we go to the Himalayan mountains in India. That's why we
Mm-hmm.
go to the jungles of northern Bali or the deserts of Australia. So the nature has to be majestic and breathtaking, right?
Yep.
Because then that puts everything into perspective as well for you. And you're like, wow, I'm just a tiny part of something much, much bigger,
Yeah.
right? So it seems so silly for me to have road rage and get angry in peak hour traffic. That's ridiculous. What
Yep.
am I doing? You know,
Yep.
so to get that perspective, so we've got a different paradigm, culturally, geographically different, and we've got immersion into nature,
Mm-hmm.
and then we've got a slowing down, which is the retreat, some time for self, and then there's the content that I teach. And so there's specific content that I teach on our retreats, um, which is quite profound. And I can say that because it's not my content. I'm not profound. It's the stuff that lots of teachers have been teaching that is quite profound. And I
Yeah.
deliver it in my way.
Yeah.
So, and my partner Talia, who is a mindfulness movement expert. So she's a movement expert and she takes our clients through mindful movement in the mornings and meditation. And then I teach the content and then we do a nature immersion. And the combination of all of these things creates a really profound experience for people.
I bet. I
And
can't even imagine. It
yeah,
sounds incredibly like you said, like to get away to somewhere else first and also somewhere majestic where it's you just can't it's so breathtaking that you're like enveloped into the space that you're in. And I like how you said you recognize like the fact that like why are you upset at rush hour traffic or things like that, because you recognize that like life is short and there's so much beauty, like natural beauty. And
yeah,
um you teach courses, you have online courses, you have that course on resilience. And um I just I feel like you've been a learner in every aspect that you've been a part of, every culture. You That mindfulness aspect of what you and your partner teach really is it's a huge part in a way of life. I guess something that I've learned a lot through my own work, personal work and healing, is being mindful of your every day, basically, especially
yeah,
um not judging but being curious. And I think that that is truly what allows us to learn the best and then to have something to share and teach others. And I love how you owned that as something that is something that you've learned like throughout your experiences, and you've taken pieces from other teachers. And I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in our own knowledge that we want it to I've noticed this sometimes in culture, in the Western culture, of wanting to be original or to have our own um, kind of secret sauce, I guess you could say. And it's really beautiful to just recognize that we're all evolving and learning and growing from one another. And I think that that in and of itself is such a powerful connector.
Mm.
Um, it's actually super powerful how you said that. Like I'm teaching things that I've learned through other teachers, and like it's the
Mm.
power of connection is that we all learn and grow and evolve from others. Like we can't do it on our own. And um that's such a beautiful way of saying it. Like you
Yeah.
articulated. You're a very good communicator. You articulated that really, really well.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And um, to someone, if any of your listeners are thinking, "Oh, I can't be a teacher," who am I to teach anything? It's interesting because I've never had a guru. I've never had a one guru. I've always thought that anyone I meet potentially in any moment can be an aspect of guru to me, whatever that means, the teacher, the wise one, right? And I can meet a 12-year-old who can say something and in a moment that they're my guru in that moment. I'm like, oh wow, that's profound.
Yeah.
And it's the way someone says something and the timing and the moment and the synchronicity and the connection and that meeting and that time in space that it just occurs. And in that moment, someone can be your teacher. And you might be sharing something with someone that you just heard last week. You might have
Yeah.
been in a workshop and a teacher said something last week and you're like, "Oh, wow, I love that." And then you're in a conversation with a friend at a dinner the next week and you share it and that person goes, "I've heard that before, but it never landed for me. Like I've read that and it didn't land with me, but the way you just said it in this moment right now really landed with me." And so in that moment, you're quote unquote teacher, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're all learning from each other. And there are these beautiful, profound wisdoms that humans have pondered and philosophized over for a long time. And every time someone contemplates something and then attempts to put it to language, it's slightly morphing the same concept. And there'll be someone that resonates for in that energetic way. And they go, "Ah, you just helped me expand into my potential a little bit."
Yep.
Right. And
It's
so,
I
yeah.
love that. It's incredible how you said that. Like it's that all those the synchronicity of when and the timing and how that like that
Mm,
certain thing that you could have heard a million times from some other people,
yeah.
but it's that timing, it's that energy, it's that I mean, to me, that's what's so miraculous about the life that we live. It's oftentimes happening in a way that is to me it's just stunning because you can't make those things happen. Oftentimes they happen because of a lot of different things taking place at one time, and you can put yourself in spaces where you have opportunity for more of that and like connection and like the retreats that you do and going into other cultures. And um I think that that's like the beautiful part of communication, education, our interactions with one another. And before we end this, I just wanted to say, when it comes to resilience, and communication, is there any, I guess, nugget of wisdom that you would offer, when somebody really is going through a tough time or feeling polarized, feeling in isolation, that they can do to access personal resilience, to cultivate personal resilience?
Mm, yeah. I think if you can find a way, and this kind of covers the two things that you've been speaking about, if you can find a way to contribute in some way, shape, or form to the life of someone else,
It's huge.
right? When you're struggling, if you can just think of someone, either someone that you know or even someone that you don't know,
Mhm.
if you can just find a way to do something for someone else,
Yep.
you're going to feel a little bit better. And you've got connection with another human being and you've got contribution. And those two things, connection and contribution, if you can find ways to do those two things, you're gonna feel a little bit better than you did before.
It's so true. I mean, it's like it's almost like a simple concept that is incredibly true, and we often don't think of that when we're caught up in our own personal struggles, and it takes you outside of yourself. It gives you that new perspective, and it actually encourages others. So thank you for sharing that, because that's super powerful, and I feel like it's something we don't often think about when it comes to resilience. So
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough. You're such a communicator, a connector. You're really authentic, and you have so much uh plethora of wisdom to offer, and yet you're so genuine. You really just come off very down to earth and real, and I can't thank you enough for just taking this opportunity to share with the resilience resourcing community and the podcast, because I I'm absolutely like beside myself that you came on the podcast.
Oh, that's really sweet. That's really sweet, Holly. And you're welcome. And thank you for having me. And if one person, if one person listening to this gets something from it and it helps them move into the next iteration of themselves and their happiness, then it's worth it, right?
Yes, that's actually exactly what I said when I did my first retreat. So, I mean, like I said, it could not be more aligned with the mindset and style of everything that you do. I it's very aligned with everything that I'm about with neuro wellness community, connecting people to resources to empower them. And sometimes that resource is their own personal resource of, like you said, the self-talk, the loving yourself and understanding that you are worth it, and um, kind of investing it within yourself and then being able to pour that back out to others. So thank you so
Mm.
much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Please send people to any of my resources. I've got, there's two free ebooks on my website. There's
Yes.
and I would like to offer to your listeners free access to my mindfulness meditation introductory course. So if you go to my online courses through jemfuller.com, and when you go to the checkout page for the mindfulness course, just
Hmm.
type in the coupon code, type spring gift, but as one word. So SPRING GIFT, Spring Gift, and it'll make that course free for you. You can download it, keep it forever. It's got guided meditations on there by me, and an introduction to mindfulness meditation. That's my gift for you listeners. And go follow me on Insta, Jem Fuller, Facebook, Jem Fuller. Maybe you might be interested in coming to one of our retreats. Just reach out to me. I'm super accessible. You can email me through my website. Just fill out the contact form. Come and find me. I'm super approachable, as you've found out, Holly. And I'm right here, and I'm passionate about communicating with real people about real stuff and doing what we can to help humanity move in the right direction.
I I can't thank you enough for offering everyone that opportunity to take a chance to do some mindfulness meditation. It's life changing. I've done it, and I am so grateful that you offered that to the community. Thank you so much. You've offered so much on this podcast already, and it's just such a privilege.